So now, let's see where we're at with this. So this is the format that we're going to be using for all of these equations. And for each one, we're going to put it in its special standard equation. This is your general format. So sometimes what happens, like in a parabola, you only get one square. That means this coefficient or this coefficient will be 0, which will wipe it out. So we'll work at one thing at a time. And did you work with parabolas that open sideways? Yeah, you only did up and down. X squares, no y squares. Okay, so we'll work with those. Probably was a year ago that you worked on these. So just a little definition. Parabola is a set of all points that are equidistant from a fixed line, called the directrix, and a fixed point, called the focus, that's not on the line. So what this means is this. If this is my parabola, basic parabola, that means your focus is somewhere inside the parabola, and outside the parabola is a line called the directrix. The distance between here and here, the vertex, the distance between here and here, and here, is what they're talking about. We call this, that they're equidistant from here. This we're going to see is the letter P. Did you do a P at all? I take it no. Okay. This is going to be called P. Now there's a bunch of formulas, and there's different ways we can find these. But my advice every year is try not to memorize the formula. Try to get a feel from the graph. Because your focus point is always going to be inside your parabola. And your directrix is always outside. So whether you're adding or subtracting that value of P, you don't have to memorize the formula, you just have to look at your parabola. You have to, if it's your focus, you're going to go inside. If it's your directrix, you're going to go outside and make it a line. So there's a few things that we're going to look at with this. And every year I have some kids that memorize the formulas. And if you're a formula person, absolutely. I think I gave you this on your note page, right? Did I? Okay. Just so that you wouldn't have to copy this all over. This will kind of give you the feeling for this. So it's basically the same format. Your square is always going to go over here. This is where your square one's going. A little bit different than what you did before. So an x squared is one that's going to open up and down. A y squared is going to open left and right. Okay, and what's going to tell us which way it's opening is this little value of P. If P is positive in the x squared, they'll open up. If P is negative, they'll open down. In the y squared, if P is positive, it opens right. If it's negative, it opens left. And I kind of drew a little example on the bottom for you. It kind of makes more sense if you look at an example rather than try to figure this part out. This is the most important one, finding P. Okay. It's the distance between your focus and your vertex. And then we're going to use that distance to go from your vertex to your directrix. And again, if you try not to memorize the formulas as much as get a feel for this. So if you kind of take a look at the pictures that I drew for you, it makes a little bit more sense. I think it does. If P is positive, opens up. Your focus comes in here. Your directrix is outside of it. I put the formulas next to here. But if you take a look at this, say my vertex is 0, 2. Let's make it 0, 4. This is my vertex. If my P is positive 2, instead of memorizing my formula and saying this is HK, instead of taking H, which would be my 0, and K, which would be my 4, plus 2 to give me 6, it's so much easier just to look at this and say, I have to go up 2. So when I move up 2, oh, my K is changing, 0, 6. See it? So rather than do the formulas, it's easier just to get a feel for your parabola. This is the formula for your focus when it's opening up for this one. This one's changing over here. Yes?
So your focus would just be 0, 6.
0, 6. That's how simple it is. But when you use the formulas, notice this formula. I want you to see the difference. This formula versus this formula. This formula is keeping the same y value because this has a horizontal shift. This is keeping the same x value because this has a vertical shift. So the formula changes. So rather than get hung up on the formula, use your graph, use your sketch. If the focus is inside and P is a value of 2, it's moving up 2. If P is a value of -2 and this is my 4, it's moving down 2. And there would be my focus. So rather than get hung up over the equations of it, just get a good feel for the graph. Now the directrix moves 2 down, but when I move 2 down, I have to just make a line. If you have to, start with this point, 0, 2, and make the y equals 2 line. The directrix is always a line. The focus is always a point. The focus comes inside the parabola. It's like a focal point. And the same thing happens when we go left and right, only the equations change a little bit because you're moving horizontally rather than vertically. Okay. The value of P is always going to be the distance between here or here. It's always equal. When we start doing them, you'll see a little bit of difference. And I gave you these examples so that it would help you out. Go back and, look at them. Memorizing the formulas are a little bit tougher, but if you're a formula person, it works the same. Okay. Anything else I need to tell you about parabolas? All right, so now this guy. So what we're going to do here is we're going to get the square by itself first. So here's the square. We're just going to move this guy like it is to the other side. And your vertex, we call your vertex HK. Like your center of your circle, it's the x, the y value. And H is always with the x. K is always with the y. So it doesn't matter what side they're on, but they're always going to be x with the H, y with the K. And when they come out of these parentheses, remember they come out the opposite way. So your vertex for this is going to be -3, 2. Kind of like, remember when you did the circle? So say we gave you a thing with the circle. You always took these out the opposite way because technically your formula is x minus h, y minus k. So they've come out the opposite way. No, the negative's going to stay there. The negative's going to stay there. It has no effect on your vertex. What the negative has an effect on is the p. This is your P. Actually, it's your 4P as soon as we look at it. But that affects your P value. Okay. So now, you know that this is going to open which way? Well, it's a y squared. So it opens left or right. And it opens left because why? Because it's negative. Okay, so do we agree that this is a parabola, the standard form? How do I know that this is a parabola, this whole equation? The square, there's only one square, right? So back to your basic thing. You guys are used to seeing this, that's why. We changed your format a little bit. We took this, we expanded this. We expanded this a little bit. So now, you know there's one square, you know this has to be a parabola. Normally your X is your square, right? And it opens up or down. This time your Y is your square, so it's going to open left or right. Look at the page that I wrote all the things on. Try to keep that handy. I gave you 4 examples on that page. See this guy here with the Y? We're trying to make it look like this. We're trying to make this equation look like this so we can tell you all these different things. If I look at this, could I possibly graph this right now from this equation? I have to have some kind of format to graph this, right? Same when you see a circle. If you saw this, what's this an equation of? You did this last year. What's that an equation of? X squared and a Y squared. Circle. Could you graph that circle from that formula? Could you find me the center of your circle? Could you find me the radius? Manipulate it how? How did you manipulate it? You did what?
Move it around.
You got to move it around, but what do you have to do?
You have to get the Y. You have to basically find the factors, but it's the square.
You have to complete the square, right?
Yeah.
You have to complete the square. So when you complete the square and you leave your little spot here and you leave your little spot here and you add it to that side, right? Eventually it's going to look like something like this. I don't know what, but something like this. I'm just going to make this up. So it eventually looks like this, doesn't it? So can you graph that? So basically we have the same situation. They give us something that looks like this. We can't graph that. Maybe we can tell you what the vertex is, but that's probably about it. I don't know right now which, I know it opens left or right. I don't know which way. And I can figure out my vertex because that's not going to change. But we have to put it into a special format, just like you put your circles into. From here, I couldn't tell you what my center was. I couldn't tell you what the radius was until we completed the square and put it into that format, right? So basically, we're doing the same thing with your parabola. We have to have a special format to put this in. And yes, I know you didn't use this format yet last year, but colleges use more of this format, and you're taking a college course. So actually, we use that format, ax squared plus bx plus c, because you don't do a y squared one. Now we throw y squared in here. It makes it a little bit different. So just bear with me. Bear with me because you're going to see how much nicer this is. So now, find your vertex. Your vertex is -3, +2. And you said it's going to open which way?
Left.
Left. So somewhere over here, I'm opening. This part is important right here, my vertex. This part is important right here because it's going to tell me how wide this thing is. I don't really know how wide this is. I know it's opening left. I know my focus is going to come inside of here. And I know my directrix is going to be over here. Okay? So I have to be able to sketch my parabola, show my focus, show my directrix, and find out how wide this is. So to find out how wide this is, I'm going to also have to find out my x-intercept. Right? Okay, so let's get back to this guy. So now, this is your axis of symmetry, same as your other parabola, right through your vertex. Right, so let's find P. So if you go back to your format, this little part right here is 4P. So we're going to take this out. This is probably the one you have to memorize. It's that whatever's in front of that part right there is 4P. That's how we can find P. So we divide both sides by 4, and P is equal to -1/4. Now our vertex, we know our vertex. Let me just write it right here, -3, 2. We should be able to find our focus, and we should be able to find our directrix using the value of P. So rather than worry about the formula, the focus is going to go to the left. So which value is going to change on your vertex point if I'm going left? H, the x one, right? So this is HK. So I'm going to go negative 1/4 that way. So what's my focus point going to be? Okay, negative 3 1/4, and my y is not changing, right? If you want to, you can convert this into a improper fraction. Make it like that. Doesn't matter.
Can you keep it as like the next number?
Yeah, you can. You can keep that one as a mixed number. Okay, what's my directrix going to do? My directrix is going to have to go the opposite way. It's going to go to the right. So right now, start with this point. If I moved right 1/4, what would my point be? What would this point be? I'm going to change my x. I'm going to move to the right 1/4. 2 3/4. And this value is going to stay the same, right? Now, is this going to be an x equal line or a y equals line? X equals, right? It cuts through the x, not the y, right? So this is x equals negative 2 3/4, or x equals negative 11/4. This is my directrix. So we found your focus. We found your directrix. We know that this opens left. We know that it opens left. Your axis of symmetry passes through this guy here. Your axis of symmetry is a y equals 2. Just like you did on your other parabola. Remember when it cut through the focus? The vertex? It went this way. Axis of symmetry. And that's it. That's all you have to know. So my point is, if we look at this, we would never know how to graph that. We would find the vertex, yes. We go find the vertex. That's not going to change. Unless we had to complete the square with this guy or something. But we can find your vertex. Once we put it in standard format for your parabola, we should be able to find everything else about this. The key point, and again, don't memorize these formulas as much as get a feel for it, but you do have to know the 4P part. You do have to know that this is where your 4P goes. Okay. Your square is always going to go on the left-hand side. This is your 4P. Your non-square is going right here. Okay. So we have to be able to tell the focus, the directrix, and we have to be able to sketch. Questions? All right, let's try another one. Maybe this next one will make a little bit more sense because you should know what it looks like before we start, right? Which way is this going to open? Up. What's the vertex going to be? 0, 0, right? You know this is going to be a 0, 0, 1. Now, the only thing is we have to put this in your format. There's your x squared. So I want to get my x squared by itself. So before we start this, I'm just going to switch these around. Good so far? Okay, so now how do I get x by itself? Divide by 2. And I'm just going to pull this guy out of here. Technically, because there is nothing, it looks like this. It looks like this. This is my 4P right here. This is the part that's important. 7x squared. You told me before it was going to open up. You told me your vertex was 0, 0. We got all that. But we forgot to find your x-intercept on the last one. But we'll find it. We can't find it here anyway. It's 0, 0. So when you do this, it's still got a 0, 0, right? It's still opening which way? Up or down? Up because P is positive, right? So we know that that's happening. all we have to do is find your focus, and we have to find your directrix. You couldn't find it from this guy, but you can find it from this one. So if my vertex is at 0, 0, I need to know my value of P. My value of P is here to here, here to here. So I take this guy right here, I say 1/2 is equal to 4P. I need to solve for P. So what do I have to do? Divide by 4. Don't fall into this trap. 1/2, flip it over. So P is what? 1/8. Okay, so find me your focus. I'm moving 1/8 up, so I need a point. I need an XY point. So if I move up, which one stays the same? 0, the first 0. And that one goes to the 1/8, right? Now move me down 1/8. Just give me this point right here. That'd be 0. Negative 1/8. What kind of line is this? Y equals, and what's my Y value? Negative 1/8. Yes.
Can you just show like the points on your graph, or do you have to like lay out the equation?
You have to give me the name for that. You have to give me the point.
But like do we have to show like the equation that we did, like H?
No. I don't really want you to try to memorize the equation because the equation changes. It's either H plus the value, comma K, or it's going to be H, comma K plus K.
So we can just write on the
I would just rather you get it right from here. It's so much easier. Try not, and I always get 1 or 2 kids that love the equations, but realize that it changes. If your Y is changing, then you're going to add the P to the K. If your X is changing, you're going to add the P to the H. And essentially, aren't we doing that when we look at your graph? We're doing it when we look at your graph, which makes it, I think, a little bit easier to do this. So that's all there is to this. That's it. We're just changing the way you look at your parabolas. We're putting it into a different format. This one goes into this format. And we're figuring out what your P is. This is P right here. If P is positive, it tells us which way it opens. The value of P itself, the numerical value, will tell you how far you go away from the vertex, both directions, so that you can find its focus and you can find its directrix. This one was a nice one because you're familiar with this guy. And you knew it opened up, you knew it was 0, 0, but you couldn't tell me the focus point, you couldn't tell me the directrix from this one, right? Until we put it into this format. And if I didn't need to know the focus and the directrix, I would never change it. I'd be fine with that guy. Yes.
Why would we need to find the x-intercept for the one before?
The x-intercept for the one before. Are we okay with this guy? I lost my stuff up here because I had heard my ink. But for the one before, when this opened, it was somewhere over here, right? We don't know how wide it is. So if you find your x-intercept, what do I have to put in here to find my x-intercept? Y equals 0. Because isn't the y equals 0 there? So you just plug your y equals 0. And it's easier to do it in the format that we found, but we can do it in this one. So x plus 3 plus, if y is 0, this becomes 4. This becomes 7. And x is negative 7. So somewhere here at negative 7, 0, it crosses. It just gives you, how to figure out how wide should I make this parabola. We always find our x and our y intercepts. We don't have to do it on the next one, obviously, because it's at the vertex, 0, 0. But we should always find our x and our y intercepts. It's probably easier once you put it into the other format, but since I erased it off, we could take it from there. Okay?